Good Monday evening to you. Hope your week is off to a great start. Thanks for joining More Sports and Les Levine. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. Going to talk plenty of Browns. Bud Shaw and Jake Burns will be along a little bit later in the show as the Browns get ready for the Senior Bowl and reshaping the roster, trying to take a step towards that ultimate goal of reaching the NFL championship game, the Super Bowl. A couple games away this year and making progress. Let's welcome in Bud Shaw, the Dr. Shaw. Bud, appreciate the time as always. Some news from around the NFL. One of our old buddies, John Dorsey, back doing what he does best. He is a senior talent evaluator with the Detroit Lions, something he was really good at. Guessing they're going to keep him away from the salary cap as well as hiring coaches, but go pick our players and tell us how to build a winner. He has his fingerprints all over the Browns and the Chiefs. This is a pretty good hire from a talent evaluation standpoint for the Lions.
Yeah, Dave, just as you were saying, pretty good at what he did in evaluating talent. I can hear Browns fans screaming, "What about Antonio Callaway? What about Austin Corbett?" Listen, every GM, you can find a couple of those picks. I think overall, drafting Mayfield, which, okay, you had the number one pick overall, I get it, but you still had to identify the right quarterback, and I think to some extent they have still. The Kareem Hunt pick in getting rid of Kaiser for Demarius Randall at the time, I thought was a good move. But you're right, when he was in Kansas City and he left there, a lot of people in Kansas City said, this guy doesn't communicate well as a guy who runs in a complete front office. His salary cap work wasn't great. I think here you can say, didn't exactly identify the next head coach, did he? And do that in good fashion. But I think picking players is what he does best. And I think it'll be a good move for them to put him in the position that they're going to put him in.
Important to note, he's the guy that traded up to draft Patrick Mahomes. So, I mean, that, he had that one pretty much nailed.
Yeah, I mean, there was always a question in Kansas City, especially when it came to that quarterback position, whether Andy Reid was the driving force or not. But let's just say he was part of the group then that decided that Patrick Mahomes was going to be a special player, and that clearly has happened. Here, he never picked a head coach in Kansas City. Andy Reid was hired. And about a week later, Dorsey was brought onto the team after Andy Reid was already in place. So, that was the one thing I thought when he was convinced that Freddie Kitchens was the guy. I was curious, like, well, is he really? I mean, I thought this was a good hire, a good situation for a head coach to walk into. And not that I would have identified Kevin Stefanski. I'm not pretending that for a minute. That's Paul DePodesta's realm there. But I think that this job looked better than Freddie Kitchens to me. I don't know why they felt the need to settle for it. And I think that was, eventually that's what cost Dorsey his time here. He wasn't ready to back off the Freddie Kitchens hire. And I think the Haslams rightly identified it was time to move on.
The other thing, it's been a crazy couple of weeks with quarterbacks. So you hear Aaron Rodgers speak that his time in Green Bay may be done. Matthew Stafford has told the Lions he'd like to be traded, and they're working to accommodate him. Deshaun Watson apparently on the move as well. So it's a very interesting time for quarterbacks, and the Browns have one that they feel pretty good about right about now.
Yeah, they do, and they have good reason to. I mean, I think we saw what the benefit of having a consistent singular voice as a head coach and offensive mind go for Baker Mayfield. He benefited from being in Stefanski's system. I would guess, if I had to bet, that he's going to continue to improve. But Deshaun Watson's a heck of a player, and to do what he did stat-wise with a 4-win team was pretty special last year. I could see why a lot of teams would be interested in seeing where Deshaun Watson wants to play.
Well, you kind of know where I'm going with this. If you're Andrew Berry, don't you have to at least pick up the phone and call and see what Nick Caserio, the new GM of the Texans, is thinking, what he's looking for, what that landscape is? And I'm not saying you go out and do it, but I certainly think you want to find out. That's a guy that, by all accounts, is up there with the elite ones.
Well, the Browns fans just went from screaming about Antonio Callaway and Austin Corbett to screaming about Dave Bacon. So there you go.
I'm here to
listen,
please.
Hey, I would doubt that I would doubt that this would happen. But if your point is, hey, if you're out to make this team as good as you can possibly make it, I think Deshaun Watson would be. Here we go. I think he'd be at least a slight upgrade over Mayfield. Now, I can't wait for people to start screaming about that, but that's what I would say.
And I mean, you say you want to improve the roster and you have to be competitive. These are the type of decisions that good football teams have to go through and have to make. I know Browns fans aren't used to that because we haven't been at this point before.
Well, I can already hear people saying, well, why would you bring a disgruntled quarterback in and replace a guy who's on the rise, who obviously wants to be here, who's embraced Cleveland and all that? But that is not Watson's reputation. So if people think that, he's some kind of a troublemaker and because he's decided that the Texans organization has let him down in different ways, that's not his reputation around the league.
Having said that, you have to be impressed with what Mayfield did, not only on the field, but as a leader. His teammates seem to have really rallied around him, which is a reason you wouldn't look at bringing in another guy.
Yeah, listen, I think that, what we saw him get put into a pretty delicate situation when, as a young quarterback trying to find his way, not playing particularly well, he suddenly has Odell Beckham Jr. on his team, and he's trying to get him the ball whenever he can to keep him happy. I'm not blaming Beckham for that, but I think Mayfield grew beyond that this year in Beckham's absence. Would Beckham make him a better quarterback if he's on the field? Absolutely. I think when Beckham comes back, if he does come back to this team, he'll be finding Mayfield in a different level of Mayfield's maturation. And I think Mayfield will be more comfortable, looking him in the eye after he doesn't get the ball for a quarter and not letting it affect how he runs the offense. And I think a year ago that wouldn't have been the case, but clearly I think Mayfield has grown in a lot of different ways. And now he has the confidence of his coaching staff too. So I think he'll only get better. And I suspect that when they go back to work next year, he's still the starting quarterback here, and that he's been offered an extension.
So you think they'll try to work the long-term deal out pretty much right after they pick up the fifth-year option, or in conjunction with that? I mean, the only reason I would say that I would push back against that is you're not sure what the salary cap is going to look like. So it might, it's the old, card thing. You don't make a move until you really need to.
Yeah, I could see your point there. I guess I'm looking at it from his development standpoint, and the fact that position has almost always accelerated salary cap wise and salary wise. So that's what leads me to believe that it's probably better to get a guy a little sooner than later, just from an economic standpoint. But you make a good point. These are strange times in the NFL, and lots of revenue has been lost, and we don't know exactly what that cap will be yet.
And to your point, the danger is he goes out and has does even better than he did this year. Now you're looking at him potentially saying, well, I'm going to go test the free agent market, and that's not a game you necessarily want to play either.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at this offense, it's hard to imagine it taking any kind of a big nosedive next year. I mean, doesn't mean that it'll be as good and that each individual component will continue to improve. It doesn't work that way in the NFL. But clearly, you've got your running backs in place, and if you add some speed to that receiving core, which I think is maybe the number one thing they have to do, whether that's Odell Beckham's return or in the draft or both, that should only help a guy like Mayfield, who's got the arm to stretch the field.
Bud Shaw, we're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll continue to talk Browns football, look a little bit at that roster, and get a little deeper into what it might look like with Odell Beckham back in uniform. More sports and Les Levine. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 614-350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
Tri-C is here for you. Now more than ever, you need a post-secondary education. So I encourage you to start your journey here at Tri-C. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. More sports and Les Levine continues. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. Let's bring back in Bud Shaw. Bud, let's take a look at the position of wide receiver. It's an interesting one. You see Beckham and Landry. Important to note, Higgins is a free agent, so that's why he's not on this list. They were talking about an extension. But between Beckham and Landry, you're tying up close to $30 million in just those two. Beckham coming off an ACL. What do you expect from the Browns with that? From my understanding, from looking at some things, they could end up without a cap hit if they decide to trade or walk away from Beckham. All the money was loaded into the front end of it, so and I'm in no way suggesting they do that. All I'm pointing out is there's a whole lot of money tied up in two receivers.
Yeah, listen, Dave, I don't think you can bring both those guys back next year. I just don't see why you would spend that kind of money on that position. Now, the problem they have, I think, is that Beckham still brings, when healthy, still brings that one element to the offense that they don't have. Whereas Landry, to me, is a replaceable part. I think he's a guy that works pretty well against zones. Doesn't seem to get a whole lot of separation when there's man coverage. Doesn't have a great speed, trustworthy guy. But I think in some of the guys that Rashard Higgins, to me, is sort of a similar wide receiver who's probably going to be a lot less money. So I understand people feel that Landry has brought a lot of professionalism, whatever else the other word you want to use to that locker room, and that it has been a benefit to this team. But I just don't know how you can bring both those guys back as you start building around, especially when you start investing more money in the quarterback position. It's going to limit your wherewithal financially at other position groups.
Now, the one thing about Landry is a really good blocker, which is going to be important to Kevin Stefanski. Assuming that's correct and there's no cap hit, it would appear that Beckham would be, a guy you potentially even look at trading. That there's probably still some value there because of what he did when he was healthy.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a guy. We all as spectators were disappointed in the first full season he had here. I still ended up being a 1,000-yard year, and I know that's not out of context. That doesn't mean a whole lot, right? But I could see where you'd certainly pursue that if there was interest. Now, how much interest there is after the injuries, I'm sure that's hurt his values to some extent. So that would have to be figured into it. But I just don't know. What did you say? It was $29 million tied up in two guys?
Yeah, between them, it's 14 and 15-ish both. And that's a lot. And the other thing is, if we look at the running back position, you're going to have a bill come due to pay Nick Chubb at some point. There's no fifth-year option on him because, remember, it's only a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick. Now, the question is, how do you think they value that? I mean, by and large, running backs are undervalued, but Nick Chubb is a lot of what sets up the play-action game here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just the threat. He has allowed them to start games where they can throw the ball early, in part because of the threat that he represents in the backfield. That you don't always have to establish the run in each game before you can use play action, and that's what this offense has shown. Just faking to Nick Chubb early in games has frozen linebackers and brought safeties up to the line of scrimmage. I think he's a critical part of it. I certainly think that they got Chubb at a good price when they did, Kareem Hunt at a good price when they did. But to me, there's no choice between the two guys. I would take Chubb over Hunt all day long, and I think that's another position where you're going to have to choose one or the other guy, and I think it'll be Nick Chubb.
I think they'll probably. I don't know that they'll go top dollar, but he's going to get near top dollar for running back, which is it's probably a little undervalued than say wide receiver at this point in the NFL.
Yeah, certainly. And going back to our previous conversation about Dorsey, I mean, I'd like to know what Dorsey would consider his best moves here, but I think getting Chubb with the second of those second round picks was a pretty good move by him when he was here.
We're going to take a call. BP in Pepper Pike is on the line. BP, thanks for the call. What's on your mind tonight, BP?
First of all, how you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good, BP. How are you?
Good. Good show tonight. And I haven't called a show in a little while since the Browns were knocked out of the playoffs, but it was obviously like a bittersweet. It was a good season overall. I still felt that, they really could have beaten Kansas City. And I don't really blame the players. I blame the offensive play calling and the defensive play calling. What do you guys, first of all, think of that thought? And then I'll ask you some more questions.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, BP, because Dave and I, at the beginning of last week's show, a lot of people were so thrilled that the Browns had gotten to the playoffs and beat Pittsburgh, and they were singing high praise of the season they had, all justifiably. But we both agreed that disappointment was the biggest takeaway from that Kansas City game. And I saw it last night on Twitter when Kansas City did what it did to Buffalo. You could already see Browns fans getting on there and saying, if we had only beaten Kansas City when Chad Henne was in the game, we'd be going to the Super Bowl because of course, in their reasoning, Buffalo didn't look very impressive and would have been a team that the Browns could have gotten past. So, yeah, that was my takeaway from it, too. I didn't specify whether it was coaches or players, but clearly I know what you're referring to. Defensively on that last drive to let Henny go 14 yards on a scramble, and then that fourth down play, that was a killer. And offensively, they didn't get a whole lot done there down the stretch.
Well,
Right.
BP, I kind of lump them together. I mean, the coach's coach, players got to go out and do it, and to allow Chad Henne to run 14 yards anywhere, even if he's catching a bus, he should be hit before he gets to the 14th yard. It just, there were a number of things. They couldn't run the ball like I thought they were going to. They didn't make adjustments once Henne was in there. You can go on, but when you have Chad Henne in, he shouldn't be converting big third downs on any defense.
I know, and it goes back. I'm sure Joe Woods is a nice guy, and I'm sure he's an accomplished defensive, coordinator. But go back to the game against the Ravens when Lamar Jackson was in the locker room. They had their third-string quarterback out there, and that was an important game. And they didn't dial up any pressure on him, and he helped rally Baltimore Ravens. And then Lamar Jackson came in and he finished off the job on the Browns. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the defense needs to upgrade its speed and its tackling. Those are two things that if you're in the NFL and you don't have speed and you can't tackle, it's going to be a long day for a defensive coordinator. And I think both of those elements were lacking for that defense this year. And hopefully they address it in the draft and free agency. They did offense last year. Let's hope they dial in and try to get that defense a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job, like you said, with the offensive line. They, shored that up. They brought in a tight end, and then they drafted a tight end. Hopefully, like you said, they'll do the same thing on defense, and I think they will. The only thing I was curious about this year was that if you look it up, the Browns were $30 million under the salary cap for this season, and I felt they could have used some of that money to bring in some guys that could have maybe helped them beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Like some backup, safeties, cornerbacks, linebackers. In your opinion, why do you think they were so far under the salary cap?
Let me we'll let you go, BP, because we have to move along, but
sure.
we'll answer that. I think part of it is they don't know how the salary cap is going to come into play this year. So the Players Association and the league have to agree. The salary cap is going to take a hit because of the pandemic. If they had used up that $30 million, it's kind of a buffer for them now. They aren't going to run into the salary cap casualties that you're reading about that the Saints are going to have and that the Packers are going to have, and that so I think the $30 million, and I'm pretty sure this is why Andrew Berry did that way. If he would have found somebody he thought was a difference maker, he'd have gone out and spent it. He didn't want to spend it just to spend it, because now you're in an area where there's going to be a hit to the salary cap. They're not sure how big it's going to be, and certain teams are going to have to make really hard decisions that the Browns aren't going to be forced to make with the upcoming season.
Yeah, and they've been on, they've had some good young players on friendly contracts, Dave, and that's certainly going to end over the next couple of years if they get as good as we think they're going to be. So I think as a guy managing a salary cap, you don't just look at the $30 million you have to spend on this year's roster, but you're looking ahead to what you're going to have to spend to keep Mayfield, to keep Chubb, to pay other guys that you really want to keep that are a much.
Let's go spend it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, one thing real quick, what reminded me last night when I was watching people weigh in on Twitter about how if they had beaten Kansas City with Chad Henne, they would have rolled the Bills, and they would have been. It reminded me of, and you're a baseball guy, it reminded me of the 2007 Indians after they lost to Boston after being up 3-1, and then Boston goes, and who do they get in the World Series? They get the Colorado Rockies. And they sweep them, And people were so convinced then if they had just held on and beaten the Red Sox, they would have won the World Series. You can't do that all the time, We don't know. I mean, I was tempted last night to say on Twitter, you guys are so sure you would have beaten the Bills. You didn't beat Kansas City with Chad Henne in there, but my better angel got the best of me, and I didn't tweet that. So,
well, the one thing the only thought I had was, boy, they let an opportunity get away, because that came back because it was pretty clear after the Bills went up. I think it was 9-0. Kansas City they put it into another gear, and it was like, oh, this one's over. I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
and if Mahomes had been in the whole game against the Browns and been healthy, not been hobbling around with a foot injury, who knows? I mean, they might have put up two more touchdowns, or who knows, 17 points. It's just hard to judge those kind of games. The one thing I'll say about Kansas City, I think their defensive and especially the secondary is better than I thought it was going into the playoffs. So I thought they caused Buffalo some real problems with just some real sticky man-to-man defense. And I think, again, we're not ready to make our Super Bowl picks here, but I've been more impressed with them defensively, and to go along with that offense, it's going to be hard to pick against them.
well, the other thing that I'll say, Chris Jones, again, he did it against the Browns. He showed up in critical spots. He did it against the Bills. He showed up in critical spots.
Sure did.
That's what's, and it's not fair to say Myles Garrett didn't, because Myles Garrett, was playing banged up pretty much the entire second half of the year. So,
Yeah.
He played every bit like a star defensive player should. But you want to believe that if Myles Garrett was healthy, he would have been like that against the Chiefs as well.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree.
Time for us to step aside, take a quick time out on the other side of break. But Shaw and I will be back to talk a little bit more Browns football. You're watching More Sports and Les Levine. We'll be right back after this timeout.
A friend of mine brought up Nature Stone.
Our floor was not a nice garage floor. It was cracked and dirty and messy all the time, and now it's just pretty. It's a pretty garage floor.
You could tell they really cared about what they were doing. They did an excellent job.
There's a room of lovely people here that have been so nice to us and so great, and such great service from the guys who did the floor, and we just really appreciate that.
And I highly recommend it.
Schedule your free cost estimate today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor. Wow, it's Nature Stone.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget. Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to More Sports and Les Levine. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine. Let's bring Bud Shaw back in. And, Bud, let's turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball and take a look at some position groups. And we start with linebacker, and this is the one that, we've said pretty much all year long. They need some upgrades. Jacob Phillips was intriguing. There were a couple of flashes where you saw the running sideline to sideline making tackles. He was banged up. Mack Wilson was banged up. Taki made some big plays, but missed a lot of tackles. I guess that's the biggest thing that these linebackers need to improve on is tackling in space. I mean, that's in today's NFL, that's what you need a linebacker to do.
Yeah, it's certainly when you see a defense trying to corral an offense with some speed, you really appreciate those guys that can get a hand on somebody and it's slow them down, if not bring them down. And you just haven't seen enough of that out of this position group over the last few years, more than few years, actually.
And the other thing is that's usually a guy that's going to, limit tight ends, and that's been a problem for years. Tight ends seem to get really excited because they're about to have career years when they see the Browns defense. And, again, Travis Kelce does that to everybody, but
yes.
in that game, Travis Kelce was all too happy to beat the team he followed as a kid.
Yeah, well, we've seen, Dave, over the last few years that you don't have to be an all-pro like Kelce, who will probably end up going into the Hall of Fame, to have success against the Browns defense. And so that's one of the things I think. I mean, obviously they play together as a unit. You need help You need help on rushing the passer. You need help in the back of the defense. And this clearly hasn't been the most consistent. I should say consistently available secondary in the league. So all of those things will help. I wonder whether they really value the linebacker position and whether they should. I'm not enough of a next gen stats guy to speak on that, whether teams are right to put their money at outside rush and in the secondary. But certainly it seems to be the way this organization is going to go.
Well, and when you look at the line, which everybody expected the defensive line to be a big-time strength, in part because of Myles Garrett. Now, there's Myles Garrett. That's a good start, but you got to remember Olivier Vernon, he's a free agent, and he tore his Achilles. Ogunjobi's a free agent. So I think Andrew Billings would have really helped. That's kind of a tackle run stuffer type. But you're looking at needing somebody to pair outside of other side of Myles Garrett, so that Myles Garrett doesn't get, you might have 5. Heck, with a double team, you might put all 5 of your offensive linemen on Garrett.
Yeah, it's a shame that Browns fans didn't get to see Vernon and Garrett, playing their best together for a consistent period of time. It seemed as if Garrett missed games during the suspension last 2 seasons ago, when Vernon wasn't, as good. Then Vernon showed up and I thought, had a pretty good season going this year before he got hurt. But Garrett never quite recovered from COVID for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But you certainly need that bookend to Myles Garrett for him to be as effective as he should be with the talent that he has.
I mean, think about what we're saying, though. The defense, struggled, and they were literally 5 points away from going to the conference championship game. So that should tell you, it is within reach.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, again, we've changed so many coaches and so many position group coaches and coordinators here over the last few years that you almost forget that if they keep guys in place for 2 or 3 or 4 seasons, that what the value of that might be. So, hopefully this organization recognizes that. I know you can't always keep your coaches. If you start having success, people come looking for your coordinators generally to make them head coaches and give them promotions when they can. But, having the same defensive structure and the same offense, this team should be a playoff team for the next 3 or 4 years, barring a serious injury to a guy like Mayfield.
When you look at last year, they spent on the offensive side of it. It was very, I mean, if you paid attention, it was stark. Long term, lock guys up we really like. Defense was 1-year deals. Let's see if we, catch lightning in a bottle. We can't improve everything at once. So you would certainly expect the defense is the side of the ball that you're going to operate on. Now the challenge is you've got some big extensions that are going to limit what you can spend, really.
Yeah, that's why the draft becomes even more important. And now, you're not drafting 1st or 5th or 7th or 3rd. You're drafting 26th. And this is where you really make your reputation as a front office. The Ravens and Steelers have been able to do it for a number of years. And that's going to be the challenge now of this organization. The good news is, I think that Andrew Berry, DePodesta, those guys have shown, I think, that they can play it pretty smart.
When you look at this team, what do you think an area, we know Mayfield developed, we know the offensive line was great, Chubb was, what is an underappreciated strength of this team, do you think?
Well, I really do think if it wasn't totally all this season or throughout this season, I do think that tight end is going to be a pretty good position group for this organization for a while. Now, I don't know what they do with Njoku, but Njoku's still very intriguing to me. And I know the last season started with him supposedly wanting out. Then that quieted down. But I like the talent that they have at that position. And I still like their second. I still like their corners if they can ever get these guys healthy and on the field together again for some length of time.
Njoku is a guy that was young, hadn't played a lot of college football when the Browns drafted him. He made some eye-opening catches at critical times, in the playoffs.
Yeah, and he's 24 years old. That's the thing. We forget sometimes when these guys have been kicking around for a couple of years and not having a lot of success. We start speeding up the clock on them and thinking, well, they've had their chance, move on. I wouldn't do that with him. I or a couple of these other guys. I don't know what Greedy Williams, whether he's going to be able to stand up to this in this league and play for any length of time, but I'm still intrigued by him. What can he be if he's healthy and playing a 16-game season?
Well, and that's the other thing. Njoku being 24, with age comes a little perspective. So yeah, he said he wanted out of here until he found out. Boy, they throw the ball to the tight end a lot, and I can put up a lot of numbers here. I kind of like it in this offense.
Yeah. No, that looks a little crowded right now, but I think he's got a spot as long as he comes back with the right attitude and wants to and keeps improving. I don't want to say wants to improve because I think he does.
The other thing is you have guys like Njoku and also Harrison, and those are guys. As you get this to develop a little bit, you're going to split them out to create another level of matchup problems because they can run well enough that you want to put a tight end on them in space. I think Baker Mayfield will like that.
Yeah, I do too, and I don't want to get back to this whole Landry thing again, but I like Jarvis Landry, and I think he's been a real important part of what's happened here. But he's got a lot of guys around him that are, if they hold on to the ball, are capable of replacing him, I think. And not just guys from his own position group, but like you're saying, tight ends that can be used, more as oversized wide receivers at times. So I don't know how it would go over if they decided to trade Jarvis Landry at some point. Probably wouldn't go over very well, certainly with fans. Maybe not even in the locker room, but I think it's an interesting offseason from that standpoint because they clearly need to add speed to the wide receiver group.
When you let's talk a little bit. Didn't get to talk to you about Kevin Stefanski being named Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by it at all. Were you surprised? I mean, think about the things that he overcame. First-year head coach, pandemic, no training camp. No preseason, there was a lot that were firsts, and to make it in the playoffs and advance as far as they did.
Yeah, and I know it's a regular season award, but he put a team on the field that operated very well without him, and with him in his basement. And I know that that's a crazy thing because it'll probably never happen again in the history of the league, hopefully. But I think it's said a lot about the kind of organization and structure that he brought to this football team. So with a young quarterback, especially, he didn't have the Aaron Rodgers to lean on. A guy who's seen it all and done it all. He had a guy who was coming off not a great year and somehow was able to put a team on the field with a quarterback that grew and in a lot of position groups, I would say, got better and better. So I think it was the right choice, and I'm not surprised that he won it.
Bud Shaw, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. I'm sure we'll touch base again next week. Bud Shaw, appreciate the time.
Sounds good, Dave.
All right. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we will be joined by Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. Stay with us. More sports. And Levine will be right back.
We're living in uncertain times, but you don't have to put your future on hold. At Tri-C, you can move ahead while staying safe and saving money. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, check out Tri-C's programs and resources, because Tri-C is where futures begin.
Well, hello, everyone. Let me tell you a little bit about Browns Football Insider. For only $3.99 a month, you can get text sent right to your phone each day from me, Dan Lobby, Scott Pasco, and Ellis Williams. In addition to that, you'll receive a Football Insider newsletter every day with special things from us, things that you won't see anywhere else on the site. You'll get breaking news, analysis, features, film breakdown, and things like that. Texting us directly gives you a great chance to cut through the clutter of Facebook, Twitter, other social media, and avoid the trolls. Also, it's the only way to get your questions on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So why should you sign up? Try a 14-day free trial. You can cancel at any time. All it takes is one text, but you won't want to cancel. We have hundreds of subscribers join us over the last year. They love it and have stayed with us. We're seeing the Football Insider community grow every week, and it's only $3.99 a month, which is less than 14 cents a day. What I like most about Football Insider is the opportunity to connect with you one-on-one and really communicate with you. So how can you become a Football Insider? You can click on cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Or easier yet, text me at 216-208-3965. Again, that's 216-208-3965.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant. Whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at smiley1.com.
More sports, and Les Levine continues. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. Let's welcome in Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. You can read him on the Orange and Brown Report. Also a great follow on Twitter as well. Jake, as always, appreciate the time. With the salary cap situation going on, still no definitive term what that cap will be next year. It'll probably be less. The Players Association League have to agree on it. There's likely to be some casualties, and you keep hearing some different names from different teams. One of the names that kind of grabbed my attention, Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints, could end up being one of those guys, a local guy here. That would be somebody that you would think, that would be in Andrew Berry's wheelhouse to try to find a way to go get somebody like that.
Yeah, the somebody like that thing is spot on. I kind of tweeted about that earlier in the week because there are teams like the Steelers, the Saints, the Falcons are in a little bit of salary cap trouble. There are some teams that have pushed their window here and kind of put off the tax bill until now, kind of keep windows open for quarterbacks, and that bill is going to come forward, and even the Eagles to a little bit of an extent. But you what you want to do is find opportunities where teams that have found success, players that have found success are, casualties to not being able to sign a bigger deal. And I think Marshawn Lattimore is a guy you think about who's had pretty steady, really, really good early in his career, kind of had a little bit of a tail off, not much, little bit of a tail off here in the back portion of his rookie deal. And you want to try to find veterans that you can flip a mid-round pick for that will have a significant impact, because those teams are looking to offload some players they know they can't bring back. Potentially doing that offers you an opportunity to swap out a mid-round pick for him, because those teams aren't sure necessarily, if those guys are going to net those conditional draft picks in the draft that you get for losing free agents. So we just have to see. Some teams like to get guaranteed picks back and lock in a certain position. So, Cleveland has an extra third-round pick. I expect them to be players going after some names that are sort of those borderline cut names, maybe even Marcus Williams, a safety on that Saints team as well. So, yeah, that is a market I think the Browns will try to tap into, and they'd be pretty wise to tap into it too, because you can get some affordable players for a year or two and then look to try to see if they're long-term pieces as well. So, there's always a market for veteran players who have proven a certain portion of their career here, and then they're looking to find another team to land with, partly because the team that they started with can't afford them anymore. So, that's a casualty the Browns may run into someday when they, hopefully Andrew Berry drafts well enough that they just can't pay all of them. So you try to figure out guys that you can pay, guys you can't pay, and then sometimes that leaves casualties that can help other teams.
The other thing is it's a crazy year for quarterbacks with Aaron Rodgers post-game sounding like he might be moving on. Matthew Stafford's moving on. Deshaun Watson says he wants to move on. Is there any – let me pose it to you this way. Andrew Berry, if he's doing his job, probably picks up the phone and finds out at least what they're thinking. Don't you agree?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not totally sure. I think the way Baker played the last 3 months is borderline elite quarterback play. And what they have to do is make a tough decision, which is, is this best version of Baker Mayfield, what he will be for the remainder of his career? Because if he is, you're obviously going to ignore most calls and most opportunities to go after the quarterbacks because you feel like you have your guy. Now, that's the challenge they've put themselves in here with the situation with the 1 year ability to evaluate their quarterback. And that's they haven't had the luxury of having Stefanski with Mayfield for 3 years to grow and blossom and watch what that becomes. They only have a year sample size, but in that year sample size, you could see Baker start to blossom. And that last 2/3 of the year, you could by any quantifiable measure could look at it and say that he was, top 10. And then you could look at the performance metrics from the folks at Pro Football Focus, which had him as one of the best quarterbacks, period. So you have to make a judgment, and that's a tough judgment to make. Maybe they make that judgment, hold off another year, and they look at maybe, hey, he's proven over another 16 games, we'll give you a long-term contract. I don't know. I just don't know how invested they are into Baker. Andrew Berry has said a lot of the right things. I think it'll be interesting if they even come out publicly with anything leaks publicly about looking at another quarterback. And they may privately make a couple calls just to see, what are the Texans thinking? What's their interest in Baker Mayfield? First of all, do they have any interest in Baker? Because the Texans, the Browns don't have the picks that a lot of other teams do. So it's like, if you're going to gauge the interest of Deshaun Watson, you got to make sure that first the Texans are even remotely interested in Baker. But look, I don't think they need to do this. I just don't think they have so many things they want to add. They have a great base. They have a great foundation now. And Baker's good enough. I asked this question earlier in the week. Like, if you don't think Baker Mayfield can take you to a Super Bowl, then you don't make this trade. I'm sorry, if you don't think he can take you to a Super Bowl, you go out and try to find a trade. If you think he can, I think you're wasting a lot of assets potentially on some sort of rebuilding project in your defense, because I don't think the offense was a big part of the problem in 2020. I think we could probably all agree about that. When things boiled down, it was defensively some structural problems there that got them in trouble personnel-wise. So if you go out and get a name, like, I don't think there's going to be any interest in Matt Stafford. I just don't know the age window and what they're asking to receive. I think if they got Baker Mayfield back, the Lions would win that trade, in my opinion, for the future. So the only one you would entertain is Deshaun. So if you're doing that, it's because you think Deshaun is a massive upgrade and you're willing to pay the opportunity cost that comes with that. And I just don't see the difference between the two being that significant based on the way Baker played to end the year. Now, again, their challenge is this the guy the rest of his career, or pushing it? Is this ceiling, or is his ceiling even higher? Can he get even better? So those are the reasons Andrew Berry's a young guy sitting in a GM chair making good money, and I'm behind a computer. I don't know. We'll have to just see kind of how it plays out. But it's a fascinating question. To answer your original question, Dave, I think they'll maybe poke around, but I don't expect to be any serious interest.
Is there any danger in allowing Baker, to play these 16 games out to get a better feel? If he goes out and plays even better, now you might be looking at, close to Patrick Mahomes money, where you're pushing that extension money.
I don't know if it'll ever get to Patrick, but I think it'll get to Deshaun, right? Like, I think it could get to that level. And Lamar and Josh Allen are on the precipice of deals this offseason too. So, what the Browns are probably weighing is, do they want to see what Josh and Lamar make and then make a judgment? Because, you could sit here and say pretty easily right now that Baker has not been as good as Josh or Lamar through his career, his first 3 years. One guy is an MVP and Josh is a borderline top 3 MVP candidate this year. So, you could sit here and say that he has not been as good as proven as those guys have been so far. Now, that doesn't project the future, which I hold Baker in pretty high regard for the future. The risk you run is that, yes, he comes out next year as a 35 touchdown, 8 interception season, continues to play extremely sound football, and then all of a sudden you have to pay him even more. My opinion is probably not a popular one, as you pick up his 5th year and then you give it one more year and you see that I have 16 more games of evidence he's the guy, and then you don't mind paying him. You're not going to there's no way the Browns are going to finally get their guy and let him walk away. Like, they're just not going to let that happen. Now, it might cost them some money, but at the end of the day, they got their guy, and that's what matters most. And if you see it over 16 more games, right now it comes with a gamble. It could lead, Baker's next year. I don't think it will, but it could. And that's the opportunity risk reward stuff you're looking at from a front office perspective. What if you sign him to a $150 million deal this offseason? All of a sudden next year he goes out and pushes back toward maybe more of year 2. You need to see as much as you can. I think they have a 5th year option that they don't even want to get into that. They'll accept it. They'll pick it up. But I think that the idea here is to talk with Baker about the projected number this offseason, see where he's sitting. If there's something agreeable, semi-close, maybe they do pull the trigger. But I expect Baker will take another gamble on himself because he believes in himself, and the Browns will use it as an opportunity to gauge him again over 16 games. If he's proving to be like that guy, he will obviously have the opportunity to make really good money. So it'll be there for him, and they'll pay him if he proves to be 16, 17, 18 games, 19 games, playoff, Super Bowl, whoever knows how 2021 goes, he will get paid. They'll pay him. So they just are probably trying to weigh that risk reward stuff right now.
Well, the Senior Bowl is coming up this weekend. And, we had the opportunity to hear from the executive director about some guys to keep an eye out for. And one in particular might be of interest to the Browns. Let's listen to Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl.
D. Eskridge is a name you don't hear a lot about right now, but the dude is electric. He has a big play waiting to happen. And I've said it a couple times, like, he looked like he was playing at a totally different speed on Mac tape this year. He looked like he was on fast forward. So he's probably going to be a low 4-3 guy. He plays every bit of that, and just get the ball in his hands, whether it's in the return game or receiver. He's got a chance to really elevate coming out of this year's game.
How much potential does he have?
Yeah, we liked him over the summer, Rob, at receiver. When I watched him at receiver, I'm like, I can't believe they were thinking about, and not just thinking about it, they tried him at corner. And the reason they did that was because of his mindset. He was, he was the most competitive guy in that wideout group. He was the toughest guy in that wideout group, and he embraced it. Some guys shy away from any kind of position switch, but D embraced it, and but they ended up moving him back, and he made a huge jump. I mean, we liked him on junior tape, but more is like the 4th round range is where we had him over the summer, and now he's like almost at the top of the board at receiver for us. And it shows the work they put in. It shows what guys can do between their junior and senior years.
And Jake, we've talked a little bit about speed. There's a guy that's probably going to be available a little bit later in the draft. Won't be for maybe 3rd round. Is that the type of guy that you add to this wide receiver position group and then let Kevin Stefanski go have some fun?
Yeah, that's the profile you want, right? You want a guy who's known to have the mid 4.3 speed with proven tape that he can go get the football in, and Dwayne does. I think he's a guy who's slow start to his career. He did not really break out until his 3rd season, and then suffered a collarbone fracture the next year when, as Jim said there, he was trying to play a little bit of both ways, and then went back full time to wide receiver this past year, and had a really nice year. I think he put up close to 800 yards and 8 touchdowns in a limited season. So he's fast. He's got pretty steady hands, and he runs routes effectively enough. It is the type of guy they're looking for. Now, you talk about an injury concern a little bit, just a flag, and then you talk about he's already going to be 24 by the time he enters the league. You got to think guys like Jacob Phillips, they targeted 21 years old when they entered the league. So that changes the scope of the career. By the end of their rookie contract, they're already pushing to the 29, 30-year-old range there. So I don't know. An analytically driven front office might want somebody younger, but as far as the type of guy goes, in that situation where a guy who can run that well and a guy who's got enough ability to catch the football with his hands, and his route running ability is good enough as well. That is the profile. Again, this is a really deep wide receiver class that has a ton of options for whatever the pick your flavor is for what your offense needs. There will be opportunities. I do think they'll consider him. I do. I just don't know if the age profile fits kind of what they're looking for. As a guy you take mid to late in the draft, like you see there, I'm just not sure that will be a perfect match. But you're right on the path of what they will look for if they do take a wide receiver, which is they feel like they need somebody who can run down the field, make a difference vertically in the passing game to open up some of the things that their guys, Jarvis, Odell to an extent, and even, your tight ends, Hooper, Njoku, Bryant, do really well at that intermediate area. So we will see what they do, what they go with. There are a ton of options. Eskridge is definitely one of them. We'll just have to see if the value, age, and all of that sort of meshes with what they're trying to do with that position, because there might be an angle to which they're saying we need to be patient, maybe get a guy who we can grow with over time. And if that's the case, you might not draft a guy that age.
When you look at the defense, what area do you think needs to be fixed the most? Or what area would you address the quickest?
I need to add defensive backs. I need to add safeties and corners, as many as I can to play these teams. I mean, you've seen it, guys. Like, to play Baltimore well, you need to have guys on the field who can run, because they have to chase Lamar Jackson, who's the most gifted quarterback runner we've ever seen. To beat Buffalo, you have to have guys who can run to cover Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, John Brown. I don't know if John Brown will be back with them, but they have some young guys, Isaiah McKinney, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Number 13 for them, rookie who's really effective in both phases, return and wide receiver game. They have speed. They beat coverage. And, the same goes with Kansas City. We know Kansas City's Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, when he comes back, Tyreek Hill is the most dangerous weapon in the league. You have to have diverse skill set defensive backs, bigger guys who can play in the slot, who can kind of play hybrid roles, and you need corners on corners who can cover fast players. The thing you'll notice, the Chiefs did it. They did it again Sunday night in the AFC Championship game. They walked down in the face and played man-to-man coverage and made life difficult on the receivers. It's what the Chiefs did to the Browns too. It's what some of the best defenses in the league do. They're not afraid to put their guys up in the face of other players and make them earn separation on routes. The Browns have to find a way to do that if they want to have any chance of success. Yeah, you want them to add, a defensive end opposite of Myles Garrett. That's great. But if you can't cover for 3 seconds or more, you're never going to get home. You're never going to have a chance to get to these quarterbacks. So give me as many versatile, fast, athletic defensive backs as possible in an offseason. We talked about it. You could do a little bit of it with the veteran trade. You have draft capital to take advantage of. Please do so. Do not. They're gonna be okay at linebacker. They'll find a way. You piece that position together. 2 of them on the field maximum at one time. Sometimes you can even have one if you have the right defensive back setting. So we will see how they adjust, but I expect them, I hope they do, add as many defensive back players as they possibly can.
Jake Burns, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. You can read him on the Orange and Brown Report. Follow him on Twitter. Always great insight. Jake, appreciate it. Thanks very much. I'm sure we'll check in with you sometime next week.
My pleasure, guys. Stay safe.
All right. Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. That'll do it for this edition of More Sports and Less. Levine will be back tomorrow night. Mary Kay Cabot will be along to talk more Browns football. Stay safe. We'll see you again tomorrow night, everybody.